Hey everybody, let's get started on all this. Um, we're going to go ahead and get to the first item on the agenda, which is some of the roadmap discussion. Um, the first one is the Ropsten Fork for Constantinople. Um, Before we started, Martin said it was about 3,000 blocks away, which should be 11 and a half hours. I think there was a release yesterday for Geth, or a little over 24 hours ago for Geth. And then Parody had their release how long ago, Offrey? A few days ago?
Free might be muted, but yeah, they released yesterday, a couple of hours after Geth.
Okay, cool. So the Ropsten Fork should be going on later. Um, let's see. I think I'm getting feedback somewhere. Oh, I think Greg, could you mute? Thank you. Okay, well, do
So,
we? Oh, go ahead, Offrey, if you had anything.
sorry, I just missed that question. I was went to toilet. I'm so sorry. Um, did you ask about the release?
Yeah, I asked about basically how long ago Parody released, and Martin said like yesterday.
Yeah, it's out right now.
Wonderful. So, do we need to do any kind of prep for tonight, as far as, or today, for some of you, for the Ropsten Fork? I'll be online.
I'll be online too. I already told the cat herders that we have a fork very soon, so they are aware. So yeah, they will also help spreading the word in case we need miners to upgrade and so on.
Okay, sounds good. And I think, yeah, most of the miners, I mean, if there's another incident like last time with the Ropsten Fork, we'll just learn more lessons from that. See what happens when we have two forks at the same time. Oh, no, actually, for the Ropsten Fork, we're just doing one fork, aren't we?
Yes,
That's right.
but well, I would assume that there will be a split and there will be some fallout. Uh, it doesn't bother me that much, but it might be good to be prepared that it might happen because I would guess that a lot of people who mine maybe they're not that active. I don't know. I'm not sure they've updated.
Do we know who's mining on Robson? Do we know anyone?
That's kind of part of the problem. I don't know anyone who's mining on Ropsten because I just know the mining pools who are mining on mainnet.
Yeah, well, I think Jamie and Foundation has maybe a miner that's running, and that one is updated. But other than that, I don't know.
I'm
And it
not even
might be
sure
some
we're
people
running that.
related to status or um, these other guys who are using testnet. Raid, and I don't know if they're using miners. They have their own. I don't know.
Hmm. I might blast out a tweet today from the Ethereum account that just says if you're on Ropsten,
Yeah.
update your node. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do that. Is there any other comments on that? Okay. Um, Next, the Istanbul hard fork roadmap. I think we talked about that last time and it just stayed on the agenda, so we might not need to go into too much detail on this. But Offrey, is there anything since the last time we talked that we should discuss about it?
Uh, no, I don't think. I mean, a lot of things are happening right now. Istanbul is like low priority for me right now. I don't
Yeah,
have any updates on this.
yeah, that's what I was expecting. Sure. And then the next item is the proof of stake finality gadget on the proof of work chain for Serenity. That was on there last time too, so I kept it on. I don't know if Danny or Vitalik are available because they're at the Stanford conference, and they'd be the best people to answer that, so we might just need to keep that on for next time unless someone wants to speak on that. Okay. Um, Next, we're going to talk about the ProgPow audit. There is a group forming or multiple groups forming to perform a third party audit on ProgPow with the intent to get an audit done before we stop accepting EIPs for Istanbul. The reason for that is to test the viability of the claims that were made about ProgPow, such as the fact is um, that it is even across all um, types of forks, or sorry, all types of like cards like AMD and NVIDIA and ASICs and FPGAs, that it has the same like hash rate and performance, and also that there's not going to be any problems once we launch it on mainnet. So like testing things about it to make sure that it like works correctly. Um, yeah, I'm not like in tune technically with what all is going to be tested quite yet, but we're working on that, and we're also looking for funding for that. So if anyone's listening on the call and interested in funding a ProgPow audit, we'll probably be calling for that soon, and you can reach out to me. Same thing with any organization on the call. Um, so yeah, that's pretty much all
So
there is about that. But oh, go ahead,
I have a
Martin.
question. Yeah, questions about that. So that sounds to me like a pretty diverse goal, and I'm wondering, will the auditors be hardware experts and experts in designing ASICs and FPGAs?
Yes, that's what we're going for. And Martin, I'm going to get you more looped in. This was a really new thing, but I'll get you directly looped in on this, since you've been following this pretty closely. Um, just because, yeah, it's pretty new, so we don't have all of the stuff exactly down yet, but we should have that really soon. Um, yeah, any other
Any update?
comments?
Any update on if they're going to be clarifying some of the specification part? Because I tried implementing it a few weeks ago, and halfway through the spec, it turns into implement this code block. There's like no narrative, no unit tests, and it seems very heavily weighted towards please use our patches, which is not something I'm wild about. So, any update on any of that from them, or
I haven't heard anything personally. You might want to visit their Gitter channel, which I think in the All Core Devs chat was a link to their Gitter channel was posted very recently.
yeah, I was there 2 weeks ago. I listed my concerns and issues, and I haven't heard back from them yet.
Okay. Hmm. I will make a note to ask them about that.
So what
Because
part of it was it that was clear?
So for some things, like in the spec, they have some undefined constants like DAG bytes. I figured out that's the size of the bytes of the DAG, but everything else is presumed in word sizes of 32-bit words. There's also some readability concerns I have with the way it's specified. Makes perfect sense to people fluent in C, but things like JavaScript and Python aren't going to be able to, easily implement the subtleties and get, like they do reference types of numerics, which is hard to read. Reference types of structures are, everyone gets that instinctively. But there's just, some readability and implementability things that I think should be improved if we're going to call this a spec that's going to be implemented. Because right now it just feels like here's our patches, go for it and parity and get, which is not something I'm wild about. I'd rather see some generic specification that's not necessarily easily implementable, but someone that's skilled in the art can implement it without too much difficulty.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely a legitimate concern. So I will let them know to join the Gitter chat and address specifically some of the things you've been saying in there. Is your name Dano Farron on in the Gitter chat, or is it like what's the nickname?
Shemnon, Shemnon.
SHE. What was that again?
Shemnon, Mark Nancy, Oscar Nancy.
Oh, got it. Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Any other comments on ProgPal? Does anyone have any further ideas on how we will even decide to implement this or what group should decide to implement this? Because I know that was kind
Yeah,
of a sticking point.
well, if we just so one idea that's been floated is to just implement it and basically let the world decide, do we want it or not? That could be done if we implement it in the clients, I mean, merge it into the mainline clients and decide on like some block number. And we could beforehand, we could decide that, well, if some random thing, Bitcoin nonce on a particular number, if it is even, then the clients will default to, we will put the default option to enable it. If it is odd, we will put in it not by default, not enabled. And otherwise, users will be expected to set their preference, go with it or go without it. That would be one way to do it. Then we don't really make a decision, we just leave it up for the world. One drawback of that is that there will be less hashes per second with ProgPow. So if we compare I mean, the difficulty is expected to go down on ProgPow. So
Yeah, I
that
would
kind
agree
of
here. This is basically a
screws a
decision
bit with
from
the
a parity perspective.
difficulty. You're breaking up
From
after
the
pretty badly.
Yeah, Martin, I think I heard all that. Offrey, what were you saying? You were breaking up. Oh, you're muted, Offrey?
Just to round off what I was saying. So even if we say there's double the amount of hash power on the ProgPow fork, only then will they appear to have the same, will they reach the same difficulties.
Hmm. Yeah, that doesn't sound good.
This is something that I think maybe the cat herders should have a discussion and put to the community. Because I'm concerned if we do stuff like block voting, that we risk splitting the chain unnecessarily. I think the cat herders would have a better pulse on the needs of the users and the needs of the miners rather than relying on a gameable system like hash numbers.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I can bring that idea up to the cat herders, and we have Offrey and Lane in here too that are part of them. So we will bring that up and see if there's a way we can find out how to equitably make this decision. That'll be good.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've been trying to come to a decision for several months, and we can't just point it off to some other group all the time and hope that they will make a decision for us. So I'm wondering really, how will this be resolved?
It's resolved by us making a fucking decision.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, that's probably true. Do we need more data to make a decision, or do you think we can just make it?
We can just make it. It's our job.
I agree.
Sorry, I just woke up.
I'm glad that that some folks have strong opinions about it. I just feel that a number of core devs have kind of said the opposite, right? That they don't feel like qualified to make this decision. So we have like maybe we can look at our menu of options, which is pretty short, right? One is sort of decide not to decide. A second is decide one way or the other. A third is I think it was Martin who suggested, right? Implement both and maybe have some randomness that would, institute a default. And a fourth is maybe some other course of action, like auditing or bringing in some experts or something. Sorry, I just want to be clear. Like those are sort of our menu of options. Are we missing any like huge options here?
Yeah, I think you're conflating a couple of them. So basically, what I said is the same thing as, I mean, if we decide to go with ProgPow and we put it out there to the world, it's still up to the world to decide. It's
well, that's
not...
assuming. Yeah. Okay. No, you're right. Even if the core devs were to decide in favor or against, then you're right. People have the option not to upgrade for sure. But then maybe it would need to be in its own hard fork, right? So there's no other.
Yeah, I think that would be prudent to make it its own hard fork. Yeah.
I think the one challenge or risk there is just somehow. Okay, sorry, I'm going to shut up. Never mind.
And the last option you said, to leave it to some expert group, that just sounds like we're trying to defer the decision even more.
Yeah, this is Piper. I honestly don't know what to do here. I've largely stayed out of the discussion because my expertise in the area is not adequate to make a decision, and making an informed decision from other people's research is also hard because it's hard to know who to listen to, which information's right, things like that. And like Lane said, it's a decision that's, frankly, I'm not excited about making for the network.
So I think personally that having a third party, as neutral as it can be, audit of hardware experts and others who will assess some of the claims of ProgPow, if we can get to a point where we can say this will work and here's why it will work if we put it in, I think that would help a lot.
Hudson, I just wanted to add a thought. If we can write an algorithm, right, to put this in computer science terms, right, so that, like, let's say we decide to do this audit and the output is X, right, so it turns out that it is or is not, compatible across different hardware, whatever the output might be. If before that process we can commit to a course of action given the output of that process, I might support that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Perfect sense.
Yeah, that does make sense.
Another way of putting it is, like, I mean, to put it in layman's terms, right, what is the purpose of the audit? I just want to be very explicit about that.
Let me pull up what we've written so far and notes on it, and if you give me a second, I can do that.
So I think the only question is if the audit passes, what's our decision? Because if the audit fails, it's an obvious no.
No, I'm saying we have to pre-commit, right? We're saying if we do the audit, right, and we, barring some completely unforeseen circumstance, and we, there's some criteria that the audit would be used to prove, and if it proves true, then we've already committed. That's my suggestion.
So one thing about the audit, you mentioned whether it performs differently on different types of hardware.
Yes.
And that, it sounds very different from the investigation, whether it's difficult to make a specialized circuit for it. And it sounds like a typical mining farm and mining operators, current GPU owners, who actually have a sorted set of GPUs, like they would test these things and determine, does this work for my type of GPU? And the pools should kind of already have this data based on the testnet which they've been experimenting with. Am I being naive? I mean, is it reasonable to think that some auditors would purchase 10 different types of AMD and NVIDIA cards and try out the hash rates on each and every one?
Guess that depends on how much we pay them.
Yeah, I'm just trying to clarify what the audit is, what the focus of the audit is. If it's
No, I'm with you. I think, well, I'm worried that we're still just asking for more information when really we're in a position where this isn't a decision it's a decision that I don't want to make. I can't speak for everybody else, but it's a decision I am not excited about making. But I also acknowledge that it's potentially our responsibility to make it, and that there's not really anybody else to make it. So I'm not sure what to do here.
I think that we still haven't explored all the possibilities about getting community feedback before we're forced to make a decision, including stuff like this audit, which I consider a piece of community feedback. So I think that we don't need to make this decision. The latest we could make a decision on this would be, or I guess I'll put it this way: is it possible we would have a ProgPow fork before Istanbul? Because for right now, I haven't heard anyone say it would happen before Istanbul, except like Martin saying we might have a small one.
I would say it's feasible, yes.
I think it could happen anytime if it was isolated, right? If it's just this one change and it's thoroughly tested. So I think it could happen before as well.
And I think by thoroughly tested, it needs to be like Dano's concerns need to be met. It needs to be implementation set. There needs to be, I mean, I was looking at some stuff on the ProgPow miner on the Gangnam testnet branch the other day, and there were people saying it was making AMD cards fail even yesterday. So, like, it doesn't. It just feels like it's not ready, which is
I
why,
agree.
it gives me pause to say that we could, fairly quickly go in and make a hard fork for this thing.
I think it needs to undergo the same rigor as the ETH1X proposals we've been talking about.
Let me copy and paste some of the notes we put the other day from the meeting I was in. And the reason I don't want to give away too much about the meeting is so that it stays neutral until we get enough stakeholders in there and make sure we secure funding, so we're not calling anyone out. But I should be able to post some of this stuff right now in the Zoom chat. Oh, it didn't format it great, but it's basically question after question, and that's only part of it. There's other things we're also deciding. There's like non-technical due diligence as a piece of this. So, given the current hardware, how would this affect GPUs participating as miners? Is there an alternative approach? What's the timeline for switching? What's the expected impact on the current miner ecosystem? Um, is what they replicated what the specification says? Does ProgPow break efficiency in ASIC chips, etc.? So it's a pretty thorough audit spec that we're expecting 1 to 2 groups to complete. And it's one of those things where there's probably not a group that's perfect to do this, but there are groups that can come up with most of this, and that would be better than nothing. Or having 2 groups do it so that it completely takes all of it.
We'd need at least 2 minimum. Yeah.
Oh, it does look truncated. I think there's like a limit for how much we can paste at a time in Zoom. But yeah, you all get the idea from what I've posted so far, I think.
Is anyone very opposed to the idea of an audit or doing more homework, assuming that we have a specific set of questions like this?
I support the idea of audits, and I support the idea of seeing if clients can implement it if they have time. That will give us, I think, more data points that we need to proceed or not proceed.
Calming down a little, I'm happy to get more information. I just want some decision that says, this is the information we're going to get, and then we're going to decide. And I'm very opposed to the notion of, we can't decide, so we'll go to the effort to let the hash power decide. I don't see risking a split in the network just because we can't make our mind up. In the US system, at least, you take a jury of ordinary people, they listen to the experts, and they decide. Yeah,
Yeah, but we haven't heard the experts yet is the problem until this
So
audit.
if we're gonna have some meeting down the road to actually make this decision, this might not be a popular opinion, but I think that should happen behind closed doors, and then we can open up exactly what was discussed after the meeting, because that's one of the problems with trying to make these types of decisions on the Aural Core Devs call, is that we're all on stage and it's not entirely a safe place to try out ideas and try out opinions. And this is a contentious topic.
Contentious jury trials happen in public. You can have
Yeah,
a
but juries deliberate in private.
right. We can. I'd support a smaller group to, do the work for us of evaluating the audit and, helping us understand it. But we need to make the final decision here in public so that people know the basis on which we're making the decision quite clearly.
Well,
I think a very important voice we're missing is the voice of the miners. And the people who are miners who are talking about it are only those who are rabidly in favor of ProgPow. So I think we need to have a meeting, and these miners will probably want it to be behind closed doors. When we ask people mining on Ethereum, especially the ones who haven't voiced an opinion on ProgPow, I think they have a very important stake that we need to discuss, and we can't do that in public because that's the way they run their business.
I have a random idea / question I want to throw out. This may be impossible, but as I'm sure you guys all know, like Bitcoin does things with miner signaling, right? Where they have miners set particular signal bits on the blocks that they mine. I suspect one reason we haven't done this historically with Ethereum is that miners play a different role in our ecosystem. But given that we're looking for input specifically from miners here, would people consider doing that in this case, like to see which they support?
So that was actually suggested by I think it was Peter from the Bitfly pool, Peter Pratcher. And the thing is, so if most miners are in favor of ProgPow, then it shows they're in favor of ProgPow. If only a few miners vote in favor of ProgPow, then they can say, oh, look, it's already taken over by ASICs. So does that really, I mean,
additionally, well, I already know the result of if we do miner signaling. It would be if we did miner signaling, it would be in favor of ProgPow because Peter's pool itself takes up 30 to 40% of the network, and he already said he'd signal ProgPow.
Okay, all right. So turning the question around, assuming you guys are right, if we're not looking for feedback from miners, then who are we looking for feedback from? I mean, we're just sort of saying the community loosely defined. Let's not get stuck on this topic for an hour because it's complicated.
Yeah. That too is something that is going to be maybe like. So a lot of the reason people are against ProgPow has been conspiracy theorist kind of ish from my perspective. So to cut through that would require having the audit come out with results, and if that quells everyone's concerns, then to me the community looks like they're in favor of ProgPow. That's my opinion.
yeah, I don't think an audit is really going to resolve anything. They're still going to be heavily debated. It's going to be controversial. We're just going to have to live with that.
Oh yeah, no, it's not that it's going to turn out to not be controversial anymore. It'll just the loudest voices are the ones either from ASIC manufacturers, which we can just say you're biased generally, or from people who say that Christie's a bad actor, if we're being blunt.
So just speaking for myself, the audit would give me more confidence to like make a decision here. It's sort of asymmetric in the sense that if something turns out to be really wrong with ProgPow, then that would be, as someone said earlier, like pretty decisive. But if there are no red flags, then we're probably still in the same situation we're in right now, which is to say it's still controversial.
Yeah.
Sure, but let's try to get that audit done pretty quickly then.
Okay. That sounds like a good plan, and that sounds like something that's pretty important, so hopefully people will step up to get that done more quickly. Um, and I'll talk to a few people. I've already been talking to a few groups who have volunteered to help. So I think
But I
that
think
yeah, go ahead, Lane.
Sorry to interrupt. I think that while I don't think that the cat herders are like magic and could solve this on their own, I do think that sort of facilitating the audit is definitely something that group could handle.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so we'll try to get to that as quickly as possible. Now, the audit may take months, so I guess the biggest thing to decide here is that going to be too long of a time for the threat of ASIC centralization, etc.
Clients could go ahead with implementation while the audit is going on and hold off on committing until the results if that's a concern.
Yeah, this is a big enough deal that I don't think it's a waste of time to keep implementing while the audit's going on. Because if it happens in parallel, then we can say, okay, everything's implemented as the audit's ending. We didn't find anything. And if along the way there's a major red flag that's found in the audit, we can just ask the auditors to immediately let us know so we can stop implementation. Did you have a comment, Lane?
I was just trying to respond to your question about, would that be too late? And unfortunately, I think we just don't have data on that. It's really just speculation at this point.
Yeah. Okay. And there's no way we can really get data on that from what I can tell. So we've decided that the audit is something that we all want, right?
Yes,
That's
I'm on board.
Okay. Sounds good. So we're definitely going to go ahead with that. And then from that audit, let's continue to implement ProgPow and make sure that we have if def else give very clear specifications and stuff like that so that we can continue to implement it with the idea that if there are no red flags found and the cat herders come back very soon to say this is probably what the community would want, then with that combination, that should give us enough confidence to have the decision kind of be made for us almost.
Should we ask for minor signaling? Yes or no?
I'd say no. I don't think it would matter.
But would it hurt?
I think it could hurt. It just is one more like conspiracy theory signal where we don't really get strong information out of it. And so the information that comes out just is something that's easy to spin and hard to actually build from.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Like, from what I have thought through, no matter what comes out of it, it doesn't actually give us a strong signal that we're like one way or the other, but it does provide fuel for anybody who wants to manufacture controversy to build off of.
Well, I guess if it shows that there's very strong support, it does tell us something. If it doesn't show that, we don't really know that much.
But that's my assertion, is that we can't actually see that it shows strong support. Like, we've got a pool that has a very large majority. We've got there's all kinds of ways in theory that it can be gamed. Like, it's and in either direction it goes, there's a story that you can tell about why it went that direction and why it isn't good information.
I kind of disagree here because saying we don't want to see signals from miners, being afraid of seeing these signals doesn't make any sense at all. If we have signals, then we can work with them. If we don't have them, we can not work with them. I think we should have as many signals as possible. And if we had miner signaling, that would be one we could use. Why not?
So even if it
Yeah,
causes more confusion,
I agree with Alfred, actually.
yeah, even
No, I'm changing my mind too. I'm going to retract my statement there.
yeah,
Good
me
thought,
too.
Alfred.
It's better to
Never
have
mind.
more signals. Yeah. How fast would it take for us to do bit what's it called? Signaling, bit signaling.
So
Is that not
the easiest form of signaling wouldn't even require any form of modification. They can just set the extra data to like support ProgPow or don't support ProgPow. And if they do either one of these, they are signaling their votes. If they leave it to whatever it is, then we don't count it. Something like that.
To make people running scripts easier, should we come up with like a 3-letter or 4-letter like support or not support kind of thing? Does that make sense? So people who are calculating this, they don't have to like read through everyone manually.
It's just one
PPY,
split block.
PPN.
Pretty script up.
Say that again, Martin.
Yeah, it's just one signal per block. It's pretty resource not intensive to collect the data.
What I meant is when you're collecting the data, if someone says "I support it!" versus support, if you're running a script to try to calculate all that, is that something that would be happening? Is someone running through and trying to count the number of times they say the word support, or should we have like an acronym that is meaning explicitly support or not support?
I think that it'll be an exact 32 byte extra data value for both, and people doing the mining can set it to exactly that value or not.
Okay, so it should be no support versus support, right?
Well, some of these might be used for different purposes, so that will break that. If we require all of the bytes to be used for it, so I'd prefer something much shorter.
Yeah, we
kind of
only-
Yeah. Could we? I'm sure we can think of something really
Yeah.
good to signal this, but we could hash it out in the all core dev channel maybe.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah, and then we'll spread the word. Let's do that. Okay, so
Sorry,
the,
just to be super explicit here, this does not require a hard fork, right? But does it require client updates?
No, just if you want to make the usability better, but it doesn't require anything.
Okay, great.
cool. All right, so we're going to be going forward with the audit. Consider if we get the funding, which I'm pretty confident we'll be able to as long as some people step up or some organizations step up. And then secondarily, we're going to have minor signaling. And third, we're going to have the cat herders do some investigation or come up with some ideas that people haven't come up with before because we've kind of been stuck in an echo chamber of all this stuff and a little bit hesitant to make decisions. And then finally, let's do a timeline for when we should decide stuff. I think if we don't, we're going to go with this forever.
I don't think we can do a timeline until we know when the audit is coming back.
Oh, that's a good point. Never mind then. Okay, we can move on in the meeting then. That only took half an hour. Yay.
Now, wait 3 minutes because I'm not sure I heard that. So we don't have any notion of when the audit will be done.
Not at the second because it I literally had a meeting about it the other day.
Do we have even a guess?
Yes, April was what we talked about. But that was because they asked me to put a date on there, and I said, well, if it's not going until Istanbul, April. But we haven't told like explicitly any of the people who are doing the audit that it has to be April or anything like that, or that it was still kind of a little up in the air.
Okay. I mean, obviously, I really want there to be a date on which we say the decision will be made.
Yeah, but we need to figure out the audit time first, and I'm thinking March or early April is something that we can shoot for realistically.
Greg, would it make you happy to say that we will make a decision within 1 month of the return of the audit?
1 month?
Or what basically a core dev meeting from within the return of the audit.
Yeah. I'll give it 2 weeks.
Sorry, the 1 month was arbitrary, just essentially using
I
an
understand.
unknown anchor date.
But we are also very tired of this. You know, I would happily decide today, but I'm not the expert. I'm happy to wait for the audit, but I'm not happy to make this decision in May or something. Yeah, awful lot of people would like to know so they can get on with their business.
Okay, sounds good.
Am I going to spend thousands of dollars to buy a rack of CPUs today or not?
Yep, yep. Okay, let's continue on with the agenda. Um,
Thank you.
so the Ethereum 1x Stanford meeting, it went really well. There was about 30 people. It wasn't just core devs, it was also virtual machine experts. It was dApp developers from a few major dApps. There was people who were like unaffiliated core developers and just experts in Ethereum in general. So there were some good conversations. Let me just pull up my notes real quick. So the objectives for this were to discuss the longevity of Ethereum, and decide on early and incremental changes that could be proposed in order to extend the longevity of Ethereum and make sure it doesn't break down or anything. Um, so
To
that's
clarify, Hudson means the ETH 1.0 network.
absolutely the ETH 1.0 network. So let me go ahead and just copy paste what the objectives were so I don't have to read them all out loud. And again, these objectives were something that were brought up by Alexi. They were not something that was explicitly agreed to from everyone in the room at all. And we didn't even really get to a conclusion on number 4, so there hasn't been a social contract made specifically that I'm aware of. Um, but that was an idea that Alexi had. Um, so the general thing was, is the Ethereum network, we need data so that the Ethereum network we know is not going to crash and burn in about a year or 2 or 3 or however long it's going to take. We're going to figure out, if the state is, this big or has this many accounts or whatever, if it's going to make the network unusable if we don't do anything about it and we have this unbounded state. We talked about ways we could combat that. The EWASM team that was there talked about their improvements and what they could be doing. And then we had simulation and testing team, which Zach can go over in a second, talk about what they're going to do. So we had the format was like 5 to 6 short presentations in the morning and also in the afternoon, followed by a breakout session, followed by individual work from everybody. It was very laid back. It was very ad hoc. Um, there was a lot of good discussion happening, and I think that there was some really good takeaways. All the videos from the presentations are online. I'd say there's about let's see, maybe 10 hours of video from the presentations, and so if you want to look in on some of that, it's interesting stuff. So let's go over some of the working groups. Alexia isn't here to talk about state fees, which, by the way, we renamed it from state rent to state fees because it involves stuff like lockups now, so it's more of a framework of ideas than specifically rent. So we're calling it state fees now when we're referring to Alexi's work. And then we have the EWASM group, the testing simulation group, and the chain pruning group. And we don't have Peter or Fred here today to do chain pruning either. So the only working group we can talk about is like the EWASM working group and the testing simulation group that Shahan and Zach came up with. So let's go ahead and start with EWASM. Was anyone who was at the event from the EWASM group in here?
I was there on the first day only. Yeah, sorry, Guillaume. I think you were there, right?
Yeah, I don't know if you guys can hear me.
I can
Yeah.
hear you.
Oh, super. Yeah, sorry, I just woke up, so I was configuring my PC. Could you please repeat the question?
Sure. So the during what is your takeaways and your like perspective from the EWASM working group that happened at the Ethereum 1x event, or your general impressions from the Ethereum 1x event?
Yeah. Well, I think we had a good discussion. One of the things that came out really is that EWASM is pretty independent from the rest of 1.x. There's a lot of interest in getting a lot of extra precompiles. So we have to think how many precompiles we really want to add. People expect that they will be able to add their own precompiles like whimsically. So yeah, that's not going to happen, or at least not not immediately. And yeah, like we had I remember an intervention from Frederick that said, yeah, we have all those optimized precompiles. For example, EC Recover that is called very often. Actually, sorry, that was Alex I who said that. And we just we're probably going to keep the precompiles that are currently there in Geth and in Parity as they are. We just want to add WASM as a how do you call that, as a way to easily extend and add some precompiles, but we're not going to be crazy and accept every single precompile just because some random person from the internet needs it. Yeah, that's roughly yeah what I remember from the 3 days.
Cool, thank you. Um, and then Lane, do you have any other comments just from the kind of 1 day interaction?
Not on EWASM specifically. I think Guillaume covered that quite well. The day I was there, the first day, I think we spent more time talking about Alexi's proposal than anything else. So I just wait for that, I guess.
Okay, yeah, we weren't going to really talk much about that today because Alexi's not here and I'd rather get it from him than
Oh,
anyone
sorry.
else.
Yeah. So just a quick general update. I've asked everyone who took notes during the 1x meetings to share them, and I've collected, I think, definitely collected notes from several people. I have my own notes as well from the first day. So I know that the video streams have been published. I'm going to publish all those notes publicly as well. If anyone has notes that haven't been shared, that would be amazing if you could share them with me and I can add them. And for the folks who already gave me their notes, if for whatever reason you don't want them shared publicly or if you want them unattributed or something, then let me know. But I hope to do that in the next few days.
Okay, great. And then we have Zach from White Block who was in attendance. And Zach, if you want to go over your simulation working group and kind of your thoughts on the event and what you guys are planning to do and as a result of it.
Cool. Yeah. So Vanessa presented their work on simulations. I think that their group was kind of working primarily on focusing on uncle rate and like in certain environmental conditions that arise and may cause uncle rate. They had aggregated data from the mainnet through various sources and ran some simulations in the K framework. So that was a pretty cool thing to see. And then on our side, we were kind of working with Alexi on establishing a test strategy, a test series, or a test plan at least, rather, on validating the hypothesis and observing different environmental factors and the effect on sync failure in relation to the increasing state size. So for the past week, I mean, pretty much since I got back from Stanford, we've been attempting to actually generate this large state size within the white block framework. So I think we agreed. At first I was kind of unclear on what the definition for state size actually is. How do we define that specifically? And what we said was, well, let's just start out with a count. Let's try to generate 200 to 240 million accounts within the network on white block, so it's in a controlled environment. So I mean, we've generated thousands before, but never millions. So we spent some time trying to figure out the most efficient way, the optimal way to actually generate those accounts within the network and not just actually generating, public private key pairs or private keys or rather. So I tried a few different methods. The first was generating a Genesis file and then just bootstrapping off that Genesis file. That proved to not work, and I didn't think it would work anyway. But yeah, so if you can actually generate a Genesis file with 240 million accounts in it, Geth will crash if you try to point to that Genesis block. So what we ended up doing was essentially kind of like an incremental counter that's just generating random strings for account addresses and just sending transactions to those accounts. So we started the new network with a difficulty at 0 and just multi-threaded it. And wrote the script in C++. So now we're about halfway there and everything seems to be working. And my math says that we'll have that state generated by Wednesday. So the idea is that we'll generate the state, save that state as an image. So that way we can run various tests repeatedly within the emulation platform. And that'll allow us to like test various environmental factors, conditions. One of the main hypotheses was that there's a correlation between bandwidth and sync failure rate. So what we think is that essentially there's a race condition because as a new node is bootstrapping into the network and syncing, it's essentially never going to catch up with the actual state because as the state size grows, pruning becomes much more aggressive. And as that pruning becomes aggressive, they're going to lose. There's going to be like holes in what they are able to in the state as they're syncing. So I kind of have been documenting the entire process, and I'll share that later. But the plan is to start actually testing this next week, and my team, and we're going to be working with Alexi and Andre, and kind of validating those hypotheses and taking it from there. So we're going to just start off simple and observe bandwidth, but I have a suspicion that it's not just bandwidth. That's a simple answer. I think that there's probably multiple conditions, but we'll isolate each one of them and observe the effects. So yeah, so that's where we're at. But yeah, I got a lot out of the event. It was really, really good. I mean, I was really tired. It was kind of like being in college again. But I mean, we were in college and everyone was talking for a really long time. But yeah, it was nice.
Cool, thanks, Zach. Brooke, do you have any feedback or anything from the conference you wanted to talk about?
I mean, nothing in particular. Got some good feedback on, state of EWASM, and it's great to connect with the team there, and have some proposals for improving the EVM and a transition for EVM to EWASM out of that. But I'll be typing that up over the next few days.
Great. And then finally, I think the only other person who was there was Anton. Did you want to go over anything? Oh, you're muted.
That's on.
Oh, I can hear you now.
Yeah. Pressing me?
Oh no, I was talking to. Sorry, Anton. I was talking to Antoine. Or I'm
Yes,
sorry.
yes, yes, I'm here. No, nothing from me.
Cool.
If it's okay.
Yeah, go right ahead, Antoine.
If you'd be able to share that state publicly, that image that you're.
The what publicly?
The once you have loaded up the 200 million accounts, that would be useful.
Oh, I think you just asked, can Zach share the state after he's loaded up the accounts, right?
What's the
It's hard to hear
Yeah.
you, so I think that's the question that was asked.
If I could share the state.
Yeah, is it like a proprietary state file kind of a thing, or?
No, it's just it's entirely test related, but I don't under what would be the. I mean, yeah, we could share it. I mean, it's probably going to be really big and prohibitively. Oh, somebody sent me a message here relating. How did you generate a chain with
Yeah,
difficulty
sorry, it
zero?
was me. I didn't want to take time from the call, but I was just curious about that. You said chain with difficulty 0.
Yeah, when I say 0, I mean as low as
All right.
possible. Yeah, so what you're saying here, I actually had some issues figuring that out. I didn't really know that right off the bat. Yeah, so like I was getting some errors in Geth that I've like never seen before. So it was a pretty interesting experience. Like block lost. Like I've never seen that. I've been working with Geth for a while. But yeah, we were getting some errors. I mean, this has been an iterative process. So, I mean, um, there were a few different approaches that we took. Like initially, we had several nodes, um, and then I found that it was actually more optimal to have less nodes. And then after we reached a certain point, it was actually more optimal to have 2 nodes because one node can't be sending these transactions. We're flooding it essentially. So it's harder for it to actually send those transactions once the difficulty reaches a certain level while simultaneously mining. But still, at this point, as of yesterday, I printed out the data or the stats, and the block time was at 13 seconds. So it's getting a little more difficult. So I'm anticipating that as time goes on, it's going to take longer to do this. Here, I'll share this link in the chat. You can check out the stats if you want. And I also posted a lot in the in this Twitter thread. So it's kind of like been so what I noticed is that the process of actually generating the state is kind of also testing the hypothesis as well, because now I need to have another node sync on the network. So I should be observant of this and taking notes and, you know, like documenting the process and the outcome and all of that. So, yeah.
Great. Wait, am I on mute? Nope, I'm not. Does anyone else have any other comments on the 1x stuff or any of the working groups? Okay. Let's see. Next are testing and client updates. So, for testing updates, do we have Dimitri or Martin in here? Martin's here.
Yeah. So Dimitri generated the new set of tests pretty quickly, and yeah, they worked fine in Geth. Now and then a while later, he pushed it to master, and they also seem to work fine in Hive. At least parity and Geth passes all the tests that we expect parity and Geth to pass. So all looks good. One thing though is that the fuzzing, we can't do fuzzing because parity there's a feature missing in parity for the new state test. Yeah, the test harness for parity. So unfortunately, we can't do fuzzing on Constantinople fix right now.
Okay. Now we can go through the clients. Let's start with parity.
Yeah, we released the St. Peter's fork released just today with 2.2.8 stable and 2.3.1 beta. This, as far as I know, affects all major networks. So whatever version you're running, you should update your node. And that's it from parity, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Geth?
Yeah, so we made a patch release on 1.8, 1.22 for the Constantinople fix. It also contains some security fixes in the peer-to-peer protocol stack. Meanwhile, we're continuing to merge changes onto the master branch, which will eventually make it into 1.9 release, which will be potentially breaking changes, but that's not yet for a while. Cheers.
Okay. Aleth?
Yeah, the important information is just we merged the Constantinople fix changes. So it's the master branch is where it should be.
Sorry, I had to yawn. Trinity?
There is a work in progress to get the St. Petersburg fix in. Probably get a release out with that next week, probably on Tuesday.
Oh, was I muted that whole time? Yeah, I was
Yep.
muted that whole time, wasn't I? Anyways, Harmony, you can give an update?
We have released Constantinople fix, likewise the others, and that's it.
Great. Can anyone speak for Ethereum JS? Okay. Then we have Pantheon.
Yeah, we shipped out the Constantinople fix for both Ropsten and for mainnet. We just did a release where we reworked all the CLI, and one of the options we added was support for the new Goerli testnet. So not the old one, but the one that launched yesterday at GoerliCon. Started work on FastSync, even though that's an older standard. The new 1x standard isn't ready yet, and whenever that happens, we are more than willing to support it.
Awesome. TurboGeth, Alexi's not here. Do we have anyone from Nimbus? Or anyone from Mana? Okay. And I've been meaning to do this, but I haven't gotten around to it. I'm going to invite the Mantis people here. That's the IOHK Ethereum client written in Haskell, I believe. And I'm going to start inviting them to the meeting since they are able to sync to mainnet. Okay. Is there anyone who can do research updates? I don't think there are, because it's usually Danny or Vitalik. Okay. Offrey, congratulations on GorleyCon. I heard it was amazing.
I think Offrey is en route to FOSDEM, and he may have like spotty internet access or something, but I can attest to the fact that it was awesome.
Great.
Thank you. You just broke up. My internet is a bit, spotty.
Awesome.
I wanted to say that I won the battle with the board of directors. So we're going to be open sourcing Whiteblock, our framework for testing, and that allows us to do things like, you know, act like the state is large, or we can simulate or emulate network conditions, or like P2P networks, and it's been pretty useful for 1.x stuff, but I think it's also applicable to 2.0. I was speaking with Mikhail yesterday, and we were talking about like helping out with their client initiatives, because they said something about the emulation stuff yesterday on the call for 2.0, and we could actually emulate like P2P networks. So if you don't have a stack ready, you could actually test. So I'd encourage anyone to get out to talk to me if you want to collaborate or work on that. So we're also incorporating like stuff like kind of presenting like this entire framework for development and design and implementation that includes like formal verification, kind of like PetriNet and like state transition modeling. And then the idea is like you come up with a mathematical proof, formal verification for your system. Then you develop, then you run emulations to generate large data sets that are going to be indicative of real world performance. And then based on those data sets, you run simulations so you can test and validate performance before you ship anything. So I hope people are excited about this because it's cool. So
Zach, congrats on the decision to open source. I think that we really appreciate it.
Thanks.
And if hopefully the community can return the favor by contributing, so let us know how we can do that.
Just use it and talk to me and let me build better tools for you, because I think that these processes will make everything much faster and more efficient and accurate and deterministic. So I mean, just collaborate and tell me what you guys need and let us help and build the tools. And so we're gonna announce, I'm trying to do some sort of marketing push around it, so we're not just dumping a code base. I want to we need to write the documentation and do clean some stuff up. I'm rewriting some modules in Rust. So any of you Rust nerds should just hit me up, because I'm actually rewriting some modules in Rust because they needed to be rewritten, and I'd also want to write Rust. So and yeah, that's it. Just hit me up. So we could emulate all that traffic. You can automate transactions. You can generate accounts. You can deploy your client. Each node exists within its own private network, so it has its own IP address. So they're logically separated from one another. So it actually recreates a real world environment. So when you test within this framework, it's actually going to it's highly accurate, right? So it'll appear as if I mean, what you see within our testing environment is going to be very similar to what you would see in the real world. So if anyone has questions, we don't need to talk about this here. Just feel free to hit me up and I will. Oh yeah, by the way, so right now we have a SaaS product. It's in beta. It's
I
running.
don't want to be rude, but can you stop shitting your products here?
Well, I was gonna say, anybody wants to use it for free.
This is not the place for that kind of thing. I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah, I understand.
Hudson, we had a couple updates. Did you see the last text message here about Ethereum JS? And
Yes, actually. Truffle Ganache is here. It's a work in progress with the Petersburg release. And then Ganache Core has an experimental Petersburg release published to NPM. David, are you still here?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry.
Oh, okay, cool. Any elaboration on that, or is it just an update?
Just an update. We just had a fork of the Ethereum JS VM that we kind of hacked together last week, so or earlier this week. But the Ethereum JS VM changes are still in progress.
Thanks so much for doing that. That's great. That'll help with some testing stuff, I'm sure.
Yep.
Okay. And thanks Whiteblock for open sourcing their stuff. That's going to be super helpful. And thanks everybody for coming. Is there any other announcements? I think we're at the end of our agenda.
Oh, I think we didn't give an eWasm update. Alex?
Oh yeah, Alex was here.
Looks like he dropped. Yeah, I mean, I guess just very briefly, we've been pretty focused on the Ethereum 1x stuff, so I don't think we have a ton to report. The other thing is benchmarking. There's been some really interesting work on benchmarking, looking at Life, which is a very interesting compiler. I think it's an ahead of time compiler written in Go, just as kind of candidates for, I guess for speeding up execution, looking at different options, considering the question of trying to do just precompiles in 1x versus full sort of user deployed contract support.
Cool. All right.
Yeah, I also have 2 more announcements, by the way. So the more advanced libfuzzer based fuzzer is now being worked on again by a guy from a Gitcoin grant. Cryptomental is his GitHub handle. And also there's another person who has started working on more focused fuzz testing of Solidity, and it is now on the Google open source fuzz testing framework. So that's been put into a lot better into production than it was earlier. That's it.
Okay. Anybody else?
Just a quick question slash remark about apparently prior to FOSDEM, there's going to be a meeting that I will not be able to attend about W3M, I think it's called, a replacement to Whisper. I wanted to ask Afri if you knew, or anybody from Perry, if there would be some videos or any notes taken from that meeting, because I would like to have a look at it.
I didn't know that this meeting is happening, and I'm still 1 hour away from Brussels, so I can't answer this question yet.
Yeah, sure. If you just happen to find out, please let me know.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks.
Cool. Anybody else? Thanks, everybody. See you all in 2 weeks. I think I'll be there. If not, someone will take my place. Bye, everyone. Have a great day or night.
Bye.
Thanks, Hudson.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.